Most people ruin fried chicken before the oil ever gets hot, and they never figure out which step did the damage. Southern grandmas spent 60 years learning exactly which mistakes to never make twice, so let's count down all 25 of them right now. Buying the pre-cut party pack. A Southern grandma never paid the butcher to do 2 minutes of knife work. The pre-cut party pack costs nearly double per pound compared to a whole bird, and the pieces come in wildly uneven sizes that will never cook at the same rate. Run the numbers once at your own store and it stops being abstract. A whole bird priced around $1 and change per pound against cut pieces near 3 week after week adds up to real money by the end of a year. Buy the whole chicken, cut it into 9 pieces yourself, splitting each breast across the bone, and you get even cooking plus a backbone for the stock pot. One sharp knife and 5 minutes of practice is all it takes, and the savings show up every single week. The pieces you cut yourself also come out closer in size, which matters more than most people realize once the oil is hot. And speaking of what you're buying, there's a second mistake happening right there at the meat counter that costs you flavor and money at the same time. Frying boneless, skinless anything. Boneless, skinless breasts are the most expensive way to buy the blandest possible fried chicken. Grandma bought bone-in, skin-on every time, and not just because it ran cheaper per pound. The bone slows and evens the cooking so the meat near it stays juicy, and the skin renders into the crust carrying fat and flavor that boneless pieces simply cannot produce. Check the case and you'll see boneless, skinless breast running 2 to 3 times the per-pound price of whole legs and thighs, a premium paid for less flavor and a harder fry. Skinless chicken gives the coating nothing to bond with except bare wet muscle, which is why boneless fried chicken so often sheds its crust in the pan. If you want tenders for the grandkids, slice a bone-in breast off the bone yourself after brining and pocket the difference. Now, before any chicken touches a drop of buttermilk, there's a thawing mistake that quietly sabotages more batches than almost anything else on this list. Thawing on the kitchen counter. Frozen chicken left out on the counter all afternoon is a mistake no Southern grandma tolerated, and it's not just about safety. Counter-thawed chicken defrosts unevenly, warm and weeping on the outside while the center stays icy, and a half-frozen center means the crust burns before the inside ever cooks through. Move frozen chicken to the refrigerator a full 24 hours ahead, sitting in a dish to catch the drip, and it thaws evenly from edge to center. Did you know that you can also speed-thaw sealed chicken in a bowl of cold water in about an hour, changing the water every 30 minutes? That was the emergency method, and cold water only. Once your chicken is properly thawed and soaking, though, there's such a thing as too much of a good thing, and that's the next mistake. Brining past 24 hours. More is not better in a buttermilk brine, and Grandma knew the ceiling. Past about 24 hours, the acid in buttermilk keeps breaking down the surface proteins until the outside of the meat turns soft, chalky, and almost mushy, a texture no amount of good frying can rescue. 4 hours is the working minimum, overnight is the sweet spot, and a full day is the hard stop. If Sunday dinner gets pushed to Monday, pull the chicken out of the brine, pat it dry, and hold it in a covered dish instead of leaving it swimming. Did you know that you can hold brined, patted dry chicken in the refrigerator a full extra day this way without losing a bit of texture? The brine's work is already done and locked in. The meat holds its seasoning just fine sitting dry. And while we're on that brine, the salt going into it is where the next mistake hides because not all salt measures the same. Swapping table salt cup for cup. A recipe written for kosher salt will wreck your chicken if you measure the same amount of table salt. Table salt grains are smaller and denser, so a tablespoon of it packs noticeably more salt than a tablespoon of the coarse stuff, anywhere from a quarter more to nearly double depending on the brand of kosher on the shelf. Grandma measured by hand and by taste, but the rule underneath her instinct is simple. When using fine table salt, cut the amount almost in half. Around 1½ teaspoons of table salt does the work of a full tablespoon of coarse kosher salt in a brine. Get this wrong in the salty direction and no rinse can save it. There's also a mistake in what you mix that brine in, and it has nothing to do with the ingredients at all. Marinating in a metal bowl. An acidic buttermilk brine sitting overnight in a bare aluminum bowl slowly reacts with the metal, and the chicken picks up a faint, flat, metallic taste that most cooks blame on everything except the bowl. Southern grandmas soak their chicken in a glass dish, a crock, or an enamel basin, never bare aluminum, and that habit was chemistry whether they named it or not. Acid plus reactive metal, given hours of contact, transfers into food. Stainless steel is safe, glass is safest, and a heavy old crock is exactly what those grandmas reached for. The same stoneware their own mothers used for pickles and clabber, passed down precisely because it never fought with what soaked inside it. If a metallic bowl is all you have, line it or use a sealed bag inside it. The next mistake happens at the flour bowl, and it's the single fastest fix on this entire list: never tasting the seasoned flour. Seasoning the flour and never tasting it is cooking blindfolded. Grandma pressed a fingertip into her seasoned flour and touched it to her tongue every single time, because the flour should taste just slightly too salty on its own. Most of that seasoning stays behind in the bowl when the chicken comes out, so flour that tastes perfectly balanced produces a crust that tastes like nothing. If the raw mix doesn't make you raise an eyebrow a little, add more salt, more black pepper, more garlic powder, and taste again. A working baseline for a fresh batch is about a tablespoon of salt and 2 teaspoons each of pepper, garlic powder, and paprika for every 3 cups of flour. Then adjust from the taste, not the recipe card. 10 seconds of tasting saves an entire batch from blandness that no amount of aftersalting can fix from the outside. Once the dredging starts, though, where you set those coated pieces down is its own trap. Stacking dredged pieces on a plate. Piling freshly dredged chicken into a heap undoes the coating you just built. The pieces on the bottom sweat under the weight. Moisture works through the flour, and by frying time, those pieces carry gummy, wet patches that slide off in the oil. Lay dredged chicken in a single layer on a tray or rack, with air on every side, and never let 2 pieces touch while they rest before frying. If the tray fills up, dredge in waves instead, coating the next round while the first is in the pot. A single layer is the difference between a crust that stays put and one that peels away in sheets. Now for the oil itself, because there's a mistake in the bottle you pour that ruins everything downstream: frying in butter or olive oil. Butter burns before frying temperature is even reached, and olive oil is the wrong tool for a deep pot of chicken, no matter what modern cooking shows suggest. Butter's milk solids start scorching around 300 degrees, a full 50 degrees below where the chicken needs the oil to sit, so a butter fry turns acrid before the first piece finishes. Olive oil survives the heat better than its reputation claims, but it fails the pot 2 other ways. Filling a Dutch oven with it costs 4 to 5 times what peanut oil runs, and its grassy, peppery flavor fights the seasoning instead of carrying it. Grandma fried in lard, in shortening, or in peanut oil, all of which stay clean and stable at 350 degrees, and that choice is why her crust tasted rich instead of scorched. If those aren't in your pantry, plain vegetable oil does the job without complaint. Save the butter for the biscuits and the olive oil for greens after cooking, where each one actually shines. Even with the right oil in the pot, though, there's a temperature line you can cross that poisons the whole batch, and it announces itself with smoke, letting the oil smoke. Oil that's visibly smoking has already broken down, and everything fried in it from that moment on carries a bitter, acrid edge. The moment wisps rise off the surface, the oil is past its limit. Pull the pot off the heat for 2 full minutes, let it settle back down, and return it to a lower flame before any chicken goes in. Smoking oil also degrades faster for every future use, so one careless overheat can spoil oil you plan to strain and save. A gentle shimmer on the surface is the look of ready oil. Smoke is the look of ruined oil. And while we're staring into that pot, check how full it is, because the next mistake sends oil over the rim and onto the flame, filling the pot past halfway. Every piece of chicken that goes in raises the oil level, and a pot filled too high boils over the rim the moment a full batch hits straight onto a live burner. Southern grandmas filled their deep cast iron no more than halfway with oil, leaving 2 to 3 inches of wall above the surface as insurance. That headroom swallows the bubbling and the displacement without drama, batch after batch. If your pot can't hold 2 inches of oil and still stay under the halfway line, the pot is too small for the job, and it's worth borrowing a bigger one before frying day. There's one more thing to check before the oil ever goes in, and it's sitting at the bottom of the pot itself, pouring oil into a wet pot. A few drops of dishwater hiding in the bottom of the pot turn violent the moment hot oil reaches temperature, spitting and popping oil at whoever's standing closest. Water and hot oil do not negotiate. Grandma dried her pot with a towel and then set it over the flame empty for a minute, letting any hidden moisture steam away completely before a drop of oil went in. That 1 minute habit is the difference between a calm fry and a stovetop that fights back. Wipe the lid too, because condensation dripping off a lid causes the same angry spatter mid-fry. Once the oil is in and ready, how the chicken enters that oil is the next place people get hurt and crusts get broken. Dropping the chicken in. Chicken dropped into hot oil from above splashes oil up the sides, onto hands, and across the stove, and the impact can knock coating loose on landing. Southern grandmas laid each piece in holding one end and lowering it away from their body, letting the far side touch oil first and the whole piece slide in with a half-second roll. Away from you, always, so any splash pushes toward the back of the stove instead of your wrist. Tongs work for the lowering if the piece is coated and set. Bare fingers holding the thick end work fine on the first batch when the oil is calm. It's slower by 2 seconds per piece and safer by a mile, and the coating arrives intact instead of shaken. With the chicken finally in the pot, the order those pieces went in matters too, and most home cooks get it exactly backwards, starting with the breasts. White meat cooks faster than dark, so pieces that enter the oil together finish at completely different times. Grandma staged her batch, thighs and drumsticks first, since dark meat wants a longer ride and actually improves at a slightly higher finish temperature. Then the breast pieces 3 to 4 minutes behind them. Staggered that way, everything comes out of the pot within the same window, juicy across the board, instead of dry breast sacrificed to done thighs. If staging feels like too much juggling, fry dark and white meat as fully separate batches and time each on its own. Either way, the clock is not the only judge of doneness, and trusting the wrong signal is the next mistake on the list. Trusting color alone. Golden brown is not the same thing as done, and Southern grandmas never confuse the two. Paprika and any touch of sugar in a coating brown fast, so a deeply bronzed crust can be hiding meat that's still pink at the bone, especially on thick pieces. Color says the crust is finished. Only temperature says the chicken is, and the two finish lines can sit 5 full minutes apart on a big thigh. A simple dial thermometer pushed to the thickest point, not touching bone, should read 165 degrees for white meat, and dark meat only gets better up around 175. Did you know that you can check dark meat without any thermometer at all by wiggling the drumstick bone, which turns loose in its joint when the connective tissue has fully cooked? Your ears have a doneness signal too, and ignoring it is the next mistake, ignoring what the pot is telling you. A pot of frying chicken talks the whole time, and Grandma listened. Fresh chicken hits the oil with a loud rolling sputter, which is the sound of surface moisture flashing into steam. As that moisture cooks off, the sputter fades toward a quieter, steadier sizzle, and that quieting down is the sound of a crust that is sealed and a piece nearing done. If the pot is still roaring at full volume, the piece isn't ready, no matter what the clock claims. Cooks who fry by sound catch slow batches and fast batches that a fixed timer misses completely, because the sound tracks the actual chicken. It matters most on second and third batches, where the oil behaves differently than it did for the first, and a clock set to batch one quietly lies about everything after. And while you're listening, mind what's in your hand, because the wrong tool punches holes in everything you've built, reaching in with a fork. Every fork hole in a frying piece of chicken is a breach in the crust, and hot oil finds every one of them. Southern grandmas turn chicken with tongs or a slotted spoon, never a fork, because the crust works as a sealed shell, and each puncture lets oil seep in underneath it, loosening the coating around the hole and leaving greasy spots in an otherwise crisp shell. The habit extends past the pot, no stabbing pieces to move them to the rack, and no fork testing for doneness when a thermometer or a wiggled bone answers the same question without breaking the seal. One tool swap kept for life. There's a similar quiet saboteur hiding in the dredge itself, One fresh ingredient that has no business in a fry coating no matter how good it sounds. Putting fresh garlic in the coating. Minced fresh garlic mixed into flour or pressed onto chicken burns almost instantly at frying temperature, and burnt garlic is bitter enough to flavor an entire crust in the wrong direction. Garlic in fried chicken belongs in powder form, in the flour and in the brine, where it seasons deeply without scorching. Save the fresh cloves for the greens and the gravy, where lower heat treats them kindly. The same rule covers fresh minced onion and fresh herbs with delicate leaves. Dried and powdered survive the pot, fresh and wet burns black. If a recipe calls for fresh garlic in a fry dredge, that recipe was never tested in real oil. Speaking of tested recipes, the next mistake involves two ingredients that each work alone and turn on you together. Doubling up the leavening. Self-rising flour already carries baking powder inside it, so adding more baking powder on top doubles the dose, and too much leavening gives fried chicken crust a bitter, faintly soapy chemical taste that ruins an otherwise perfect batch. Use one or the other, plain flour plus about a teaspoon of baking powder per cup, or self-rising flour with none added and never both together. If you're buying baking powder for the job, reach for the aluminum-free kind, which sidesteps the metallic edge some older powders carry into a crust. The right amount makes tiny bubbles that lighten and crisp the crust. The doubled amount makes flavor damage you can't season your way out of. Check the flour bag before you build the dredge every time, because the bag doesn't announce itself. Once the chicken is finally fried, rested, and glorious, the mistakes aren't over, because what happens to the leftovers has rules too. Covering hot chicken. Sealing warm fried chicken under foil or a pot lid traps steam against the crust and turns hours of careful work soggy in minutes. Grandma let leftover chicken cool a full 30 minutes, uncovered, on a wire rack, letting every bit of steam escape while the crust set firm. Only then did it get covered, and loosely, before going into the icebox. That half hour is also safer handling, since a sealed container of hot food cools dangerously slowly in the middle. The crust that goes into the refrigerator dry and crisp is the crust you can actually bring back tomorrow, which matters, because the way most people reheat fried chicken is the next mistake, and it's the cruelest one on the list. Microwaving the leftovers. The microwave turns leftover fried chicken into a steamed, rubbery ghost of itself, softening the crust from the inside out in 90 seconds flat. Did you know that you can bring day-old fried chicken back to nearly fresh fried condition in a plain oven? Set it to 375 degrees, lay the cold chicken on a wire rack over a sheet pan so hot air moves underneath, and give it about 15 minutes. The crust re-crisps, the meat warms through gently, and the second day sometimes eats better than the first. No rack, then flip the pieces once halfway. The oven is the answer, the microwave is the mistake. Now, about all that oil still sitting in the pot, because what happens to it next separates the frugal from the wasteful. Pouring the oil down the drain. Used frying oil down the sink is money in the garbage and a clogged pipe waiting to happen, and no Southern grandma ever did either. Let the oil cool completely in the pot, then pour it through a cloth or a fine strainer into a clean jar, catching every crumb of debris that would turn it rancid. Strain clean, that oil fries chicken 2 or 3 more times before it retires, and a batch's worth of oil saved is real grocery money over a year. Did you know that you can tell retired oil is truly done when it darkens to the color of strong tea and smells sharp instead of neutral? Where that jar lives between fry days is its own mistake waiting to happen, though. Keeping the oil jar by the stove. A jar of saved oil parked next to the burner sits in heat and light all week, and heat and light are exactly what turn good oil rancid ahead of its time. Grandma kept her strained oil in a dark, cool cupboard, tightly lidded, well away from the stove's warmth, and it stayed fresh across weeks instead of days. Rancid oil announces itself with a sharp, painty smell the moment you open the jar, and once it turns, it flavors everything it touches. Cool, dark, sealed, and labeled if more than one jar is working. The next mistake leaves the pantry entirely and goes back to the bird itself, to the parts most people throw away or ruin. Frying gizzards straight from the package, Gizzards dropped raw into hot oil come out like rubber bands, and that's why a whole generation thinks they don't like them. Southern grandmas simmered gizzards first, 45 minutes in gently salted water, until a fork slid in easy, and only then dredged and fried them like any other piece. The simmer melts the dense working muscle tender, the fry adds the crust. The same two-step treatment works on chicken hearts and livers, though livers need only a gentle few minutes of simmering before they're dredged since they're tender to begin with. Done in that order, gizzards turn into the crispy, deeply savory bite that people line up for at church suppers, made from the cheapest part in the case. Skip the simmer, and no fry time can save them. And the very last mistake on this list is the one that separates a good fry cook from a legendary one, and it happens after the first batch comes out. Sending out the first batch untasted. Grandma never let the first batch reach the table without pulling one piece aside and tasting it herself, standing right there at the stove. That first piece is the report card for everything, whether the salt landed, whether the oil ran hot or cool, whether the coating gripped. Caught after batch 1, every problem is fixable, with more seasoning in the flour, a nudge of the burner, a minute more or less in the oil for every batch still to come. Caught at the table, it's too late for all of it. One taste, 30 seconds, and the next 3 batches come out better than the first. That habit, more than any single trick, is why her chicken never had a bad Sunday. Now you know all 25 mistakes, so go fry like somebody's grandmother taught you, and tell me in the comments which one you've been making all along.